What was the last solid year you had? For me, it was 2016. I had just graduated from college after having to take a medical leave of absence because of my heart condition. In the spring of 2017, I had landed my first big girl job and was excited about where my life was headed. But then in September of that year, I was laid off. I was feeling bummed about the layoff and needed something to look forward to. Then my sister and I were gifted tickets to the Route 91 Harvest Festival in Las Vegas. We packed our bags, excited to make new friends and dance our troubles away. This was going to be a 3-day-long festival. On the first day, I wasn't feeling well, so we left early. On the second day of the festival, I was still feeling lightheaded and weak, so we showed up late. On the third and final day of the festival, we were determined to make it the whole day through. We made it to 10:04 p.m. At 10:05 p.m., what sounded like fireworks went off. I had a gut feeling that this wasn't fireworks, and when I looked up in the sky, it was confirmed. Rounds and rounds of bullets began hitting all the concert goers. My sister and I got on the ground. The parking lot that we were in was just pavement covered with AstroTurf. As we laid on the cold ground, Allie and I held hands, like what you see in the photo. We repeated, "I love you," to each other. I remember telling myself to take deep breaths because I knew that once I got hit by a bullet, I'd be better to respond to it if I was relaxed than if I were panicking. I remember squeezing my sister's hand and just repeating, "I love you." She kept repeating, "I love you, Case, keep your head down." She was looking up, trying to figure out the next move for us. I remember the sound of my sister's voice when she looked up and she saw a woman's head bleeding. She said, "Case, her head is bleeding, her head is bleeding." And in that moment, that's what made it real for me. I knew that at any second, I could die or my sister could die. So I just kept pulsing her hand and repeating, "I love you." She said, "I love you too, Case, but we're going to get out of here." I remember being on the ground for what felt like an hour. I felt liquid touch my leg, and I wasn't sure if it was my blood, the blood of the woman next to me, or somebody's spilled drink. I continuously held her hand, and she said, "We need to get up." So we got off the ground. We hopped the fence and ran beneath the stage. While under the stage, we sat behind a 2-foot-tall concrete block, like what you see in construction zones. We pulled our legs in to protect our vital organs. And this is when I called my mom. "We're in the middle of a mass shooting," I said. My mom instinctively began singing to me. She sang "You Are My Sunshine," which has been my favorite song since I were a little girl. I sang it along with her, amongst the sounds of screams and crying coming from those around me. After being on the phone for a few short minutes, my mom noted that it sounded like things had quieted down during our conversation, and that she thought Allie and I should run again. So my sister and I ran from beneath the stage out into the open and through the parking lot. As we ran, we saw pools of blood, discarded items, and crowds of very confused people. My sister knows how difficult it is for me to run because of my health conditions, so she encouraged me to push on. She was holding my hand again and saying, "You can do this, Case." We ran to a building. We tried to open it, but the door was locked. This is when I decided to call my brother and let him know what was going on. He didn't answer, so I left him this voicemail.
Rob, Ali and I were just in a mass shooting. No, it's his voicemail. We're currently okay. We love you. We love you so much. I love you, Rob.
After I hung up the phone, I spotted another door on the building. I ran over to try it, and it was unlocked. My sister and I ran inside. Both of our iPhones were near empty, so we searched the room for supplies. We desperately needed a phone charger. My sister found a phone charger and held it up. "Figures, they're Android users," she said. Using what little phone battery she had left, my sister called her friend, who was a Las Vegas local, to come and save us. Once again, we needed to run. We left the safe space in the building and ran back outside. At this point, we still had no clue where the shooter was. As we were running, I was thinking, there's no way I can continue to run. But then something amazing happened. I experienced runner's high. That feeling when pain transitions into effortlessness, and it's almost easier to keep running than it would be to stop. I saw the truck in the distance, and my cowgirl boots felt weightless as we sprinted. When we arrived, we piled in as many survivors as we could. My sister and I sat in the cab, holding hands. This was the first time that either of us had cried during this whole ordeal. I had just survived the deadliest mass shooting in modern US history. The next couple of years were an adjustment. I was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder and began experiencing extreme insomnia. Things that I often enjoyed, such as going for walks, would become a trigger for me. A lot of the crosswalk buttons that you press sound like machine guns. I would then loathe New Year's and the 4th of July because all of the sounds were a reminder of that day. I was adjusting to my new normal when in February of 2020, I was involved in a horrific car accident. The paramedics used the jaws of life to get me out of my car. I was taken away in an ambulance, and in the emergency room, the doctor informed me that I had broken both my right foot and my left wrist. I was working full-time as a model and artist and could do neither one of those things, as I was now wheelchair-bound. My wheelchair was too large to fit into my apartment, so I had to move back home. I still had bills to pay, even though I was unable to work, so I had to adapt. I thought, well, my right hand still works, and I can do digital artwork, something I had never done before. So I taught myself how to do logo designs and cartoons, and I began selling those to pay my bills. This was also the point in time when COVID-19 hit, and everyone was forced to quarantine. Studios were shut down due to the pandemic, and designers were forced to think out of the box to get their clothing on models. So I began modeling remotely, with designers sending me their apparel and a photographer using a long lens camera to get the shots and social distance. Once my wrist was healed, I was put into a walking boot. I was using a scooter to get around, so I would wheel my scooter to whatever area we were going to shoot. I would take off my walking boot, exposing my very atrophied leg and my swollen foot, and we would get the shots without the designer ever knowing that my foot was still broken. It was a real play out of FDR's handbook. Soon, I was walking again. I had worked really hard to gain my strength and felt so proud of what I had overcome. It felt like I could finally exhale. But then in April of 2021, my entire world came crashing down. I had met a famous CEO several months prior who gained his fame for paying his employees a living wage. Him and I bonded over shared interests and political beliefs, but over time I would discover he wasn't who he said he was. He had a long history of abusing others and had hired PR teams to cover it all up. He began berating and insulting me when I disagreed with him, and on the last day that we spent together, he sexually assaulted me. The following day, I filed a police report, anonymously. I feared having my name attached to what he had done to me. I went and I had a rape kit done. At the hospital, the doctors scraped beneath my nails, checked my body for injuries, and took photos of me. I spent the next few weeks lost, suicidal, and frustrated with the lack of response from the police department. The only thing that kept me going during this time was my artwork. This piece depicts the mask that I wear every day, pretending to be fine. And I'm giving myself permission to take that mask off. Later last year, I received an email from a journalist from the New York Times who asked me if I'd like to go on the record. At first, I wasn't going to go on the record. I know so well what happens to women who speak up against powerful men. But I thought about the women he silenced, the women he abused, the women he would harm in the future if I didn't speak out. And I knew my voice needed to be heard. So I went on the record, having my name, my face, and my survival story shared for the world to see. When the article was released online, I was met with both hate and support, but I chose to focus on the support. An 18-year-old wrote an inquiry on my website and said, "Kacie, I don't know what it's like to endure the trauma you have gone through, but I hope you find peace in knowing that your response to this trauma has inspired me and hopefully millions of others to stand up for what is right." After experiencing all of these events, I've learned a few things. First, trauma is isolating. People don't know how to respond to you when you've been through something life-altering. Your relationships will change, including your relationship to yourself. When we experience something traumatic, there's often a lot of shame that comes with that. We can experience a loss of self-esteem that can be debilitating at times. But what I've found is that there's strength in our stories. And by using our voices and sharing our experiences, we can heal not only ourselves, but others too. Trauma is compounding. When I was assaulted last year, my brain did this thing that I call the conveyor belt of sadness. This is when you go through something and your brain decides that it's a great idea to remind you of every terrible thing that's ever happened to you in your entire life, all the way back to being bullied as a child. See my black eyes in that photo? During these moments, I like to think of myself as a child again. I can see that little girl who was bullied and tormented by her peers, and I know the pain behind her smile. And I know that as I stand here in front of all of you, I am making that little girl proud. Trauma is like running. It's especially difficult in the beginning. But over time, you'll get into a groove and you'll find your stride. I remember thinking, I can't live another day. But then I did. And then I did the day after that, and the day after that. If you're in the midst of your own trauma, try to imagine yourself on the other side of this hurdle. And believe me, even when you feel like you are just getting by, you're actually inspiring those around you. Thank you.